opportunity like that when your kid is like doing something they're not supposed to me is just an opportunity to teach them a lesson.
Like, oh man, all right, let's get ready for this. In the last episode, I told you about when I was 14.
I think people who seek out self-mastery and looking to get better in other areas of their life as well. Dude, there's nothing more vulnerable than like getting choked out or punched in the face. You know what I mean? It's a theory. We're workshopping it. We got a long way to go. I don't know. And you probably see it with your sons now too. Like, you're teaching them things that are going to make them better going forward. I had that conversation with my son recently as well, where, you know, he kind of was like, I'm sorry, I am screwing up or I keep messing up or something like that. And I had to sit down and explain it to him like, man, you are not messing up. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing right now. You know, you're a kid, you are living, you're learning, and you have so much to learn. And your job is to just experience things right now. Just, you know, try things, see what sticks, see what you like, see what you don't like. If you do this, oh, then that happens, right? Like, that's just kind of the natural progression of a human being. But my job as your dad is to make sure that I say, hey, you shouldn't do that, you can't do that, you be careful doing this, etc., because I have to provide those, instill those values and that direction, so that way it could shape you into being a better person later on. Because I always tell them all the time, like, you know better, you do better, right? You didn't know better right now, right? Mm-hmm. And this is me teaching you, so now going forward, you know. And it goes into like the whole discipline thing. Like, I grew up with a bad example of discipline, where you made a mistake, you got disciplined. You know what I'm saying? And I was always curious about how I would approach, you know, disciplining my son. When I, you know, as I got older and as he started, you know, he was like forming into, like, from being a baby to actually being a child, and you got to be like, no, don't do that, don't touch that, da, da, da. And my natural philosophy just became like, hey man, you didn't know any better, like, you made a mistake, and that's okay, let me sit down and teach you, and that way you do know going forward, right? If the same thing happens over and over again, now you're making a choice to continue this, even though you know it's not what you're supposed to be doing, right? And then that's when we have to have conversation. Then that's when we have to, you know, look at whatever it is, taking things away, all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, you get into like the disciplinary action. But if your kid is making mistakes and doesn't know any better, to me, I feel like it's not fair for them to have to experience something that throughout that process, you're thinking as a kid, like, whatever, my dad's just being mean, or, you know, he's always on my case about something. But in all actuality, it's really our you know, parental figures trying to shape us to be better people.
Yes. So, with that being said, that requires a lot of patience. So what you're like, how you're raising your son and everything of the sort. Where do you think that patience came from?
I was lucky in a sense that my sister had her son early, and I was around. And I helped out in a lot of instances, you know, with raising my nephew. And I always kind of say he was like my practice kid, because I was changing his diapers, I was feeding him, you know, helping keep an eye on him and stuff like that, like kind of trying to help out where I could when it came to, you know, my sister trying to work and balance being a mom, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, honestly too, so it's a mix of both things. For one, it was having that experience at like 15, 16, helping raise my nephew, gave me a perspective of what like fatherhood looks like. Because sometimes it would just be me and him, and I'd let it, like, just do what I had to do. You know, I was 16. I wasn't like a guru, but I was like, okay, this is easy. He likes this. He doesn't like that. Keep him out of that. You know, it's simple when baby. When it's someone else's kid, it's the easiest thing in the world, because you know at the end of the day you can give them back. But like when it's yours, you're like overthinking everything. So anyway. But honestly, as I'm talking about it too, I think the second thing was, and this is kind of the overarching kind of driving force for me when it comes to fatherhood, is being the kind of dad that I needed when I was younger. And it's easy when it's your son, because they are, like we talked about earlier, little versions of you. And my son thinks in a lot of ways that I do. You know, his mind works the same way that mine does. And I think a lot of boys are all the same, like not all the same, but like, for the most part, they share the same like tangible qualities where like they're rambunctious, maybe they're a little impatient, they could be a little sporadic and everything like that. They're not sitting still for too long, you know what I'm saying? And for me, I always go back to what I felt like I missed out on as a kid from a parenting perspective. And it was just, man, I wish somebody would have just sat down and told me what I was doing wrong.
Yeah.
It was a lot of like, you would just get punished or things were just going bad for the wrong reasons or for whatever reason, I should say. And you weren't privy to why, And as a kid, you don't know why things are the way they are. And you don't know what your parents are walking around with, like the kind of stress or other things that are affecting them, which changes their mood towards you. And so like, my relationship with my dad was always kind of walking on eggshells because he would come home and you would never know exactly what the temperature was, right? And then when the disciplinary kind of stuff would take place, you're just like, I don't genuinely know what I was doing wrong, you know what I mean? So for me, I was like, I never want to be that guy. I want to be somebody who is able to talk through something with my kid and just kind of teach him. Every opportunity like that, when your kid is like doing something they're not supposed to me is just an opportunity to teach them a lesson. And so I'll put my like best like, Uncle Phil hat on, you know what I'm saying? And like try to just sit down and like have a life lesson, with my son. And that way he's more aware first and foremost. So right now he knows better, so that's number one. But then also too, he's able to reflect and be introspective, because I think that's another thing that's important for people to learn and kids is like to be like introspective, self-reflective, and be able to kind of like, monitor your emotions and be able to kind of review your actions and your behavior and have a good like internal sounding board, you know what I'm saying? I really was screwing up or whatever the case is, because there's going to be a point where they're going to be out there on their own and there's sometimes nothing you can do to help them. I feel like, ultimately sitting down and trying to build that foundation for your kid is important. Like I was saying, like there were moments in my life where it could have went south, but I had some kind of, internal navigating system from my grandmother and my mom that was like, nah, you're not going to do that. You know what I mean? And there's peer pressure and there's influences that as your kids are getting older, you worry about them, dealing with. And right now it's pivotal, for us to instill that like internal, kind of sounding board so that way they know, right? Like my son hopefully will know, like you know better, and this is the wrong decision. Yes. And if you decide to continue to do it, you're going against what your family, is kind of built off of, like your last name, what we stand for as a household, your values. I don't want to use the disappointment thing as like I don't want to shame my kid.
Yeah.
But hopefully they'll understand that they're directly going against who he is, what he was raised on, and that'll be enough for him to, smarten up.